Performance Strength and Conditioning webinar series, where we'll be hearing from Brett Bartholomew. So the episode today is sponsored by Eccentric, the creators of the K-Box 3 flywheel training system. And if you want to find out a little bit more about that, you can check out Eccentric at eccentric.com. You can see the address on the screen there, or you can follow them on Twitter at @go_eccentric. So this is the fifth episode in the series as we continue to expand our network of education events, which will include the upcoming RTAD conference in the UK, which is a Charter Champion, running April 9th and 10th down in Gloucester. And since the last webinar with Nick Grantham, we've also launched our US Super Clinic, which is being held out at Mike's facility in the Athletic Lab in Cary, North Carolina. So Mike's pulled an awesome lineup together there, including Boo Schexnader, Mike himself is presenting, Greg Gatz, Nate Brookerson, Bob Alejo, and Ryan Horn. So if anyone is tuning in from the US and is interested in that, head on over to our website and you can find out a bit more about those guys presenting. So on to tonight. We're really privileged to have Brett speaking and sharing this information with us this evening on the topic of building buy-in. And as some of the information is being shared is going to be part of a book that Brett's looking to release later this year. We do ask that you respect the effort Brett has put into researching and developing it, and treat that information with some discretion. Now, I'm sure a lot of you, like myself, we've been following Brett on social media, and you'll know that he has built up quite a reputation for his coaching philosophy away from just the prescription of sets, reps in the weight room and speed training, agility training. So I'm really excited to hear him present this evening. Now, one of the reasons we've opted for the webinars over podcasts is that it gives you, the viewer, an opportunity to interact with our presenters like Brett. So if on your sidebar within the webinar, you should be able to see a live chat box, which you can put questions in, comments as we go. Obviously, at the end, we will have a Q&A section where there's an opportunity for you to ask Brett some questions about anything that he's spoken about, and we may be able to pick some up as we go along as well. So big welcome to you, Brett. Thanks for taking the time out this evening to come and have a chat with us.
Hey, my pleasure. And I know one of the things you wanted to touch on, and hopefully it's helpful for other folks, is a little bit about my background. So I guess at the end of it, just to kind of make it short and concise, a big thing that really, looking back on it now, established my philosophy of treating people like the ultimate performance variable was a time when I was hospitalized. I was 14 years old, dealt with depression, kind of dealt with it in an unhealthy way, became fairly obsessive compulsive about training. I wasn't educated at the time about sound training. I used it as an escape. A lot of my friends got into hardcore drugs, cocaine, methamphetamines, a lot of things like that. And that was kind of my core social group going up. My family also went through a divorce. So I just kind of used training as an outlet. I played baseball and football growing up. And then I just started to focus solely on sports. Long story short, that depression kind of manifested itself really into an exercise addiction and eating disorder of sorts, where all I ate was low carb, low fat. I trained, like I said, obsessive compulsively, and ended up being institutionalized in a hospital for lack of a better word, for a better part of a year. My blood was tested every morning. I couldn't shower unless I was at a certain percentage of my BMI. Everything I ate was rigorously measured. Anything that came out was also rigorously measured. And I was around all these people that were supposed experts in what they did and had this facility that was top of the line in terms of saving lives, helping people recover from these kinds of issues, and all this. But, what you started to realize quick is just because you have the tools and the toys doesn't mean that you're great at what you do. Oftentimes I went to these therapy groups which were mandated by the hospital, and they almost treated everybody as if they had the same symptom. And how often is that people in our profession do the same thing? Athletes kind of become these faceless subjects for many coaches that just happen to fit into these periodization models or programs that are so prized by different coaches, and they forget to focus on the individual. You hear all kinds of excuses. You hear people say, well, I've got 30 guys or I've got 30 minutes. How can I do this? How can I do that? It's just not feasible. I can barely remember their names, let alone have a conversation with them. I've been in those settings too. I was thrust into it at a young age. I started training fighters in exchange for my own fight training in college. I was a Golden Gloves amateur boxer. And then once I interned at Exos, API at the time before going to the University of Nebraska and working with football, being a graduate assistant strength coach and head strength coach for 8 Olympic sports, and an assistant for basketball and football. And then back to Exos, where I was thrust into a situation where it wasn't uncommon to have 30 high school kids with no help. Then train a kind of mixed group where I had 2 wounded warriors who may have been partial amputees or ACL reconstructions, and they had to train with 2 guys from NBA Europe, and then a healthy Major League Baseball player. Very eclectic group, but because of staffing issues and just the model that we ran, I would have to train them all as one, right? And so what I would do is find whatever we were trying to work on that day, a big rock. So let's say for the sake of conversation, it was sled sprints, right? So I would have, after we'd go through the warm up and the plyometrics and all that, all of which was modified for those individuals. Let's say I got to the sled sprint aspect, and my healthy athlete might have been doing, 2 sets of 20-meter sled sprints, or 2 sets of 3 to 5 20-meter sled sprints with a good amount of rest. Another guy that had just got cleared from ACL reconstruction might have been doing a low sled march. One of the amputees might just simply be doing a load and lift, learning how to really get angles and hip extension, because he was going to have to go back and continue to serve through the Wounded Warrior or Eagle Fund program. It still had to learn how to move. Bottom line is you'd have situations where athletes paid for training, the United States government paid for training, and you can't tell these people no. And so you don't get the benefit of saying, hey guys, back squat has been shown to be the most efficacious kind of squat in order to enhance, speed or power or this and that. Really what you'd have to do is look at the limitations of these individuals and say, hey, this is a pattern, right? I need you're going to be doing a goblet squat. You're going to be doing a front squat. You'll be doing a back squat. You just start to learn that you can't really get dogmatic in your approach. And I learned that firsthand when all these people treated me when I was in the hospital like I had the same symptom or same disease as everybody else, right? And it didn't matter that they had all this technology. They didn't know how to connect to the individual. And it's funny, when you operationalize somebody's purpose and you get to know their true drives of why they're there, what they're trying to accomplish, you steer your communication, your cueing, and your coaching so much more directly, and you're able to get more out of them. I post a lot on social media now about how to communicate, how to engage, and I think it frustrates some people and naysayers on the internet because they just constantly want to hear about how true strength work is done at 80 to 85% and beyond of one's repetition maximum, or the posterior chain is critical to speed development, or the neuromuscular system is the key to enhancing rate of force production. They just want this stuff that we can read about again and again and again, and it has value. It has tremendous purpose. But are these really the things that are holding us back? I get that there are a lot of coaches that don't use appropriate means of training, and there's always going to be, no matter how many ebooks, webinars, seminars, courses, classes are put out, there's always going to be people that just simply don't use great training practices because not everybody cares enough to learn and to educate themselves. But we're also forgetting about this entirely different piece of our athletes certainly rarely care about that stuff unless we put it into simple, swallowable, and personal terms for them. When I tell my guys that we're doing a cluster session of squatting during a max strength phase, they're not like us. They want to know how that helps them in their realm. And then, some other folks ask, well, where's the research being done on this? How can you say better engagement or better buy-in leads to better training? Guys, this is where you have to think big picture and get out of just studying strength and conditioning. There are millions, right, of organizations, case studies, and all kinds of things throughout the business world that talk about these things. The Harvard Business Review did a study, I think in 2012, with the Gallup organization, GALLUP, that used basically a case study of over 1 million people, which sure as heck beats the crap out of any research article that we do in our own field in terms of sample size, that shows more highly engaged employees are not only more productive, right? There's less absentee days. there's all kinds of less issues in the workplace, and those things create sustainable cultures. That's how companies like Zappos and Google are able to do the incredible things they do. They provide their employees with not only the tools necessary to do what they want to accomplish, but also resources around, let's create an environment and a culture where we communicate, whether visually or verbally, with people in an entirely different way and change the way that they view the work that they're doing or what they're taking part in. And it's not that hard. Alvin Roy, who is your grandfather's grandfather of strength and conditioning, used to do this with the San Diego Chargers when they used isometric-based training and really started a lot of this stuff in the world of American football. He would have signage by certain parts of the apparatus that would say, you know, things like speed or agility. And then underneath it, it would say a more agile or a stronger athlete is a more agile athlete, or a stronger athlete or a more powerful athlete is a faster athlete. Now think about the associations that go on there, right? We direct our attention towards something we care about, and then it reframes it into something that we need to do. So it feeds in together. These kinds of messaging, this kind of messaging is universal. Now, when Coke Zero wanted to think of their new ad campaign and target a soft drink, a diet soft drink that was more towards men in that market, it wasn't an accident that they used the color red and black. So I guess what I'm saying is I started to study after you research all the periodization models, you read all these books on running and all this stuff that's tremendous, and we got to keep reading it. But I started to segue into, okay, let me study more about human nature now. I like this stuff. I understand it. I get its value, but I need to understand humans in their most emotional, right, sense, so that when I communicate it to people, I can help them care about it as much as we do. And any culture that's successful long-term has that. They have a leader, or really what I like to call a guide, who communicates with his people and treats them like a part of it rather than a piece of it. And, you know, it's hard, but what you're starting to see is people are more and more open to it in the market, because they realize at a time now when we have more access to information than ever before, that doesn't make one a great coach. You know, the information age at some point in time needs to go into the transformation age. So that's really what started me writing the book that I'm working on now. What really started kind of changing the way I guide and mentor people. When I get interns now, you know, I don't just tell them to get Science and Practice by Zatsiorsky or, you know, Matveyev's work or anybody. I start telling them, read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Read books on social and emotional intelligence. Because any of us that have worked with interns have all seen these kids that have read, you know, Eric Cressy's blog or name your other coach's blog, all these great people. So that's not a knock on Eric or anybody else. But then these people are now self-reported experts on this, and they have no idea how to talk to an athlete that might be from, you know, East St. Louis. And they don't know how his communication should differ from the kid from rural Iowa, right? And those things matter. And ultimately, that's the separation of what makes a great coach. Is facilitating something beyond this parasocial relationship where one person knows a lot about another person, but the other person doesn't have to give up that much information. Coaching is bigger than that. So I hope that gives people, you know, a little bit of insight as to why I think this stuff matters. I lived it firsthand. I've worked in a wide range of settings. I got thrust in a wide range of settings. I'm only 30 years old, but I feel like I'm about 55. I have everybody to thank for that. My previous situations, Exos was tremendous in developing my career, because there'd be times we're at a military base for 4 weeks and you have to teach these guys why, you know, CrossFit probably isn't the most sustainable training method for them. And I can't sit there and just regurgitate information. I have to know about their world and communicate our information in a way that they can see really impacts theirs. So hopefully that wasn't too long-winded. In some instances, being long-winded is needed to give appropriate context. But that's kind of the piece there of what led me there.
Sure, that's great. Thanks for sharing that, Brett. So without sort of interrupting too much, I'll let you get on and present to the guys. So into the main content.
Sure. Yeah. All right. So first off, one of the reasons, you know, I decided to do the screen share so that you guys could see me is we all know about, like, there's experts in the field that just kind of like try to hide, right? And They may spew out information, but you never really see them. You never see vulnerable sides of them. You just kind of hear about their successes. And I'm big, I think it would be hypocritical if I talk to you about communication, but you can't see me. Now, that being said, I am going to refer to some notes. Otherwise, I tend to go off track a bit with my passion. So I will look away periodically, but I wanted you guys to be able to see me rather than just an avatar or picture. Also, I'm trying to share as much information as I can. I don't have all the answers, right? And I have plenty of gaps myself as a coach, but I do work my butt off to figure this stuff out. And I think that all of us have to have a linchpin beyond just great programming. And one strength of mine I've found is I am able to get buy-in from my athletes, right? And I just fell victim for it myself. I said, get buy-in. Really, I use the term building buy-in. Getting buy-in is not something passive. It's not an event. You don't give some kind of rah-rah speech or a feel-good moment and bam, all of a sudden you've got buy-in. It's built. Dan Paff and I agree on this wholeheartedly. I've given presentations for Altus, him and Stu McMillan and their staff a number of times. And I always say that trust is the macronutrient that best feeds the coach and athlete relationship. Dan phrases it a little bit differently and says, communication is the oxygen to the athlete. And I remember the first time I presented on this stuff, and I had told Mark Verstegen and Dan, I don't know how people will take to this. I've spoken on agility and strength and power development and speed and all these things, and everybody loves that. But people aren't always ready for a paradigm shift, no matter what they say. And one thing Dan said is, it took me over 40 years to realize that, great coaching is more than just these methods and this philosophy, and that really it's understanding people's drivers. And so I remember when he said that, and Mark told me about when he wrote Core Performance, he basically sat on it for 4 or 5 years, not thinking people were kind of ready for that change in paradigm. And so some of this stuff may be new. I'm not asking anybody to agree with it. I'm sharing my examples and things that social psychology research, behavioral research, if you look at just human behavior and you look at all these kinds of, and even history, it's hard to deny. And it's up to you a lot of times to be able to figure out how you can utilize these kinds of tools with your athletes. But buy-in is built, right? And I asked people on Twitter, what are some of the things they really wanted me to answer? And one person who I respect tremendously, Zach Brule, had said, initial buy-in in his case, he thought was fairly easy. But it's when athletes or clients struggle, that's when he failed to kind of to be able to get buy-in from them. And I understand Zach's point. There's a very, very, very famous saying that says, the teacher appears when the student is ready. Basically meaning that we can convey whatever messaging and information we want, but at the end of the day, unless that person is willing to listen and wants to do something with that, it's not going to matter. I have a professional football player right now that has all the talent in the world, but he just can't seem to focus on that training as a process. It's not a novelty. And, unfortunately, I've worked with people like that in the past, and they almost have to have a bad season before they're willing to kind of humble themselves and then say, okay, what can I do better? So when you're trying to get buy-in, right, that comes down to a number of things, whether, it's them having adversity or them just starting with you. One, you have to know your own coaching style. Authenticity is the number one step, right? That's a proverb, know thyself. And you have to be able to be who you are. There are some things that I am not skilled at, and I'm never going to try to pretend, right? And there are other things that I have tremendous skills at. I'm a passionate guy. When you almost lose your life like I did, you learn very quick that life is short, and you just got to give everything you have. Because when I was sitting on an 8th floor of a hospital in Minnesota at about 90 pounds and my resting heart rate of 32 beats per minute and living in a cardiac ward of a hospital for the first 2 weeks, you just start to not take too many things for granted. Now, whether you're more of an introverted coach or extroverted coach, that doesn't matter, right? All that matters is you know how to adapt that for the individuals that you're working with. So you've got to know yourself and be authentic is number one. Number two is know your athletes. I'm a firm believer in archetypes. We see it on social media, right? You'll have the friend that always posts about, they're always posting something political. You'll have somebody that always posts pictures of their babies or their kids. There's inevitably that person that posts their food as if they're Anthony Bourdain, right? People will always fall into these certain categories of how they behave, right? And athletes are no different. You have leaders. You have people that are kind of like the team cancer, or a little bit, naysayers, have a lot of talent or maybe not a lot of talent, but have this kind of negative attitude. You'll have charismatic individuals. You'll have more introverted individuals. This is something I'm working on within my own book. I actually list out about 16 archetypes. And all of these archetypes have strengths and weaknesses, and you have to approach them all differently. One of my athletes right now, he values feedback to a tremendous degree, nearly wants it after every rep. And my background, my master's degree is in motor learning, so I know that that's not always best, but I still have to give this guy a little bit of what he wants. And he's what I call a blue collar archetype. Comes in every day, is always on time, doesn't need much attention. He just wants to know if his back's flat during an RDL, and if he's getting great hip extension or really good speed on the bar during a clean, right? And so there's another individual that really wants to train alone. But in my setting, I don't do that. I train groups anywhere of 10 to 30 guys on average. Every now and then there's groups of 5 or so, but it just depends. So what I have to do with him is, I can place him at the last rack in the room. I don't try to call him out during the session unless he's doing something that really, form-wise is a strong contraindication. But I'll go over and lower my vocal tone, change my body language, and ask him, like, how you doing? How's this feel? Do you understand this? And that's an awareness piece on my end. So, being able to know yourself, know your audience, and then certain strategies that we'll talk about here in a minute are critical to being able to adapt it no differently than you'd adapt your program. I'm sure there's a lot of people on the webinar that are smarter than I am, but I have very few programs that I've ever printed off for my athletes, no matter how far or close I've periodized them out. And there's really rarely been a time where I've never had to change one thing, whether that's lowering a given average percentage or a percentage for a particular set, changing a certain movement, just altering something based off their body, the time, the circumstance, anything like that. At Exos, I had about an hour and a half to 2 hours to train these guys. In the college setting, as many of you know, if you work at university or even in private settings, sometimes you get 30 minutes, 45 minutes. In college football, you get significantly more. Here at Unbreakable, it varies. I can have anywhere from 30 minutes to 90. It's usually more towards 30 or 60. So when I had a former student of, Mike Stone's come in here one time, and God bless Mike Stone, talk about somebody that's advanced the field and been a godfather of it. The gentleman asked me why I wasn't waiting 6 to 8 minutes in between sets of max effort squats. Well, in the private setting, you can't really do that. I understand what the research says, but there's some times where I have to pair a movement with a compound movement. There's sometimes where I have to do things that in research aren't really, the best case scenario, but I also have to adapt that because we live in the real world. So being able to manage those expectations and really kind of program in a way that's adaptable is huge, and your communication needs to be no different. So talking about some of the strategies, right? I would say the number one strategy that I use, and I'm not trying to create a fancy name here, I just tend to use alliteration because it helps me remember it, is something I call the 3R method. 3R is in Robert, right? And so in case you guys couldn't hear that well. And I just try to say you relate, or you research, you relate, and then you reframe. And that just might mean when you're trying to talk to an athlete and find the best way to communicate with them or build that buy-in, right? And this can go from the first interaction to the last piece, and whether you know a guy for 1 minute or 10 years. Researching just means, guys, ask them questions. It's interesting. All mammals want attention, but only humans crave acknowledgement. What I mean by that is if you go home and you forget your dog or cat's name, as long as you play with that dog or cat, right, they're not going to care whether you remember their names Fluffy, Steven, Zippy, Scooter, or what have you. They just know my owner's here, I'm happy, awesome. However, if you were to introduce your best friend to another individual, or your business partner or your athletic director or what have you, and you forget their name, right, there's going to be a little bit different interaction there. And my point is people want to be understood. They want to be acknowledged. They want to feel like you really just give a shit about them. And I apologize for the language, but to an extent, you got to speak frankly. And so researching, I may say, hey, Richie, nice to meet you. I understand you've likely had a lot of strength and conditioning coaches in the past. Tell me about some of the attributes of coaches you've responded best to. And I don't care if that's a strength coach or a position coach. Tell me what kind of coaches you've really responded well to in the past. Right then, Richie thinks, okay, this guy, one, has acknowledged me. He's not trying to force himself on me, and he wants to know how I learn, right? Same thing if you want to ask your guys, are you more visual or verbal, right? Being able to just let your athletes know if you're addressing a group of 20 that you want to know how they best kind of respond to you and to come up and let you know. I use a Google form that I send to guys. You want to talk about metric management and people that, get all this data. Guys, I send a 5-question Google form that asks people, what did you enjoy most about this session? What helped you learn? What are some things you'd like to see? Like how can I communicate better? Just simple stuff. Some of them are multiple choice. Some of them are fill in the blank. Some of them are open-ended. And none are so probing that the athlete feels like they can't tell me. So for example, if I'm coaching an agility session that day and we go through some, basic closed skills and open skills and then a competitive drill at the end, simply asking guys, which of these three parts of the session did you enjoy more? Lets me know, does this guy really value the technical aspect and the learning and the nuances, or does this guy just really like to get after it? Now, is that going to wholesale change my session? No. But what it does do is it allows me to adapt my communication and being able to get these guys to understand, if I'm talking about technical pieces, I can hone in on a few other guys and speak on another level with them. If it's the competitive aspect, I can skip all the jargon and just let these certain guys know it's time to get after it. So all you're trying to do with the research part of the 3 R's is get information and ask them questions. Quit talking for 5 seconds and just try to let them have this stage so they feel a little bit more comfortable, right? And then after that, you want to relate. Now, whether that means, relate to them of how one skill can affect another, right? So I'm trying to talk to my guys the other day about how eccentric hamstring strength is important. Guys, they don't care about motor unit recruitment. They don't care about muscle tension. They don't care about the exact mechanisms that go on physiologically with eccentric strengthening. What they do want to know is, oh man, like when I run or when I cut, my body absorbs eccentric load, or when I'm traveling at 17 miles an hour and I'm a 195-pound individual, I can incur these amount of forces. Wow, okay, I get why my hamstring needs to be strong now. Or I told one of my receivers the other day who's had 3 past hamstring injuries. It's the first year we've worked together. He's had 3 hamstring injuries that have shortened the season for him the last few times. And I try to just tell him, this is where your hamstring is most vulnerable. This is also where you tend to be at that point in your stride. That guy then says, okay, he's asked about my past history and something I want to get better, my hamstring strength or my durability. Now he's telling me how this exercise fits into that. So not only has he related that he cares about, making this better for me and helping my longevity and durability, but he's reframed it now, which is the 3rd R, so that when I look at this exercise, now I know it does X, Y, or Z for me, right? Now I know that this helps with this aspect. When I was at the University of Nebraska, I learned under a tremendous strength coach named James Dobson. The best thing I learned from him was not the aspects of programming, to which they were, tremendously skilled at, was not how to use bands and chains, right? It was the fact that he set the expectation for the guy so clearly at the beginning and the end of the session, something that I now refer to as, from onset to encore, where he would say, guys, we have a heavy squat day today. Keep in mind, this heavy squat allows us to do more explosive things in the future. He didn't sit there and talk about everything that goes on just to regurgitate and hear himself speak. And what he allowed those athletes to do was walk away, and instead of being like, we're squatting again, damn, my knees hurt, why do we do this? I don't get this. What am I, a weightlifter? I'm not a power lifter either. Now they're like, okay, let's load up on squat. Let's do this. Let's get ready to go. It's a soft skill, but it's important. And again, you're trying to sell people on a future result they can't see. So the 3R method, the research, relate, and reframe, is a tremendous, tremendous method to be able to start with your athletes. And you can do it with the groups. I coached a group of 23 yesterday, and I walk in, tell them exactly what we're doing, why we're doing it. I get them warming up together. As they're warming up, as they're going in their lines in sequential fashion, I start to talk to them a little bit about what everything does. And you know what else you do? You make them laugh, right? You give them a random fact of the day. You engage. as strength coaches or performance specialists or physical therapists or whatever anybody is out there, you don't need to be some hard ass, I'm the main man. This isn't your show, right? Roy Sugarman says this great. Roy Sugarman is a tremendous researcher of neuroscience out of Australia. He says, you're only an expert once the athletes invite you into their lives, right? And a mistake I made early on, and for the record, I'm a big believer in don't listen to anything anybody says if all they're talking about is their successes or the answers they have, right? Anybody that's good at what they do should have far more failures than they do successes. And I'm prototype number one for that. I first started coaching elite athletes, again, just by nature of circumstance at 23 years old. And I went in there and I just tried to wow them with my intelligence of, guys, you know what the science says when you do this, or research shows that when you do that. And these guys are like, cool, dude, you're a nerd, but like, how does this relate to football? And I made that mistake early on where I'd go into my office nearly exhausted. And I'd think, what? Oh, I didn't seem to connect with the guys. My programming is good. Like we have, the ratios of pushes to pulls, squats, hinges, all this stuff. We're doing great depth jumps. I'm measuring this, measuring that, but it just didn't feel like I had their trust or buy-in. And I just tried too damn hard. And oftentimes that's what happens. We're trying so hard to be able to, get these guys going that sometimes building buy-in is stepping back, right? And so a lot of strategies there, and you've got to let them take their part in it as well. I want to take some questions here just so I don't sit here and ramble on. Otherwise, what happens is you guys end up just leaving and saying, wow, I heard this dude talk forever, but I didn't get any of my questions answered. So James, how can I go about seeing some of these? I see some stuff on the side. I have questions. Yeah, if you have questions, go ahead and put it in the question box, guys. Anything goes. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know. Okay, no question.
Guys, if there's anyone who wants to put any questions in at this point, just fire them through onto the live chat box. It should be on the right hand side of your screen. Brett, just so you know, you are on mute just right now, just so there's no echo through from my feed onto your camera. So I'll bring you back in a second. One of the as we're waiting for a few questions to come through, here we go. So I'll just bring you back in. Hold on. Brett, we've lost you there. Hold on, just one more. Brett, can you see a microphone at the top of your screen? It might be highlighted red right now. So yep. There you go. You're back in.
Okay. So social emotional. Yep. Okay, great. I got 3 questions here. I like this, right? So we got elaborate on the 3 R's. Okay, I'll do my best. So research, relate, and reframe. I'm typing them into the box right now. Research is get to know your athlete, know your audience. Comedians do this, right? They go out and they tailor their jokes to the clubs that they're in. Movies that are released in the summer, people do market research. What kind of movies do people want to see in the summer? That's when those big superhero movies come out, right? They know when audiences are going to go in and try to escape the heat. They know typically when, past, what are the highest grossing revenue. That's why you also see a bunch of movies come out at Christmas time. But research just means get to know them. Are they visual learners? What kind of coaching do they respond to best? Watch their body language. Guys, over 60% of communication, way more than 60, is body language, right? So try to find different ways that you can learn about them so that when you do talk, it can be more pointed. A gentleman the other day that joined, right? A pro athlete says, when I asked him, I go, what's the best coach you've ever had? He goes, my defensive back coach. And I said, okay, well, why? And he said, you know what? Not only did he keep me accountable and get on me when a lot of people haven't, they just kind of, treat me like I'm special because of my talent. He goes, but there's no detail that he ever leaves out when trying to coach me, right? And so I go, okay, great. So you like the little nuances. Yes. I had another athlete that joined who was an offensive lineman. And he says, man, I'm just a workhorse. I don't want a lot of words. I just want to just show me what I got to do and I'll go. Great. That's a visual learner, right? And by and large, we see that people have 4 drives, typically to learn, acquire, bond, and defend. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But I take that information then, and then I relate aspects to that, right? So if a guy is that technical, he really wants the technical pieces, right? I start to relate things that we do, whether it's during, again, a wall drill or harness marching or depth jumps or, vertical jump or a clean, a squat, anything. And I try to relate how this helps them or how nuances in that technique applies to what they're doing on the field. So relate and reframe go in together. Right? Or even relating, guys, can mean your personal experience. If an athlete tells you about it, ask where they're from, ask what their favorite food is. Start to ask these little things. And I'm not saying that you have to be Oprah Winfrey and sit on a couch with them. People act like I'm telling them to have some deep conversation. I'm just saying in between sets of squat, you go over there, hey man, how's this feel? Have you squatted in the past? Where are you from, by the way? Where'd you play your college ball? Help them see more than just a coach. And then reframing, once again, is taking whatever you're trying to develop quality-wise or taking an exercise and helping them understand how that helps them in a particular skill or something that they do. If somebody's doing a reverse lunge the other day, right? For example, we were doing a combo movement, a reverse lunge to a step up. Well, guys, a defensive back in American football oftentimes has to backpedal into coverage. And then if it ends up being a handoff or they have to go support, right, a short pass over the middle or anything like that, they then get out of that back pedal and have to have a great accelerative step coming forward. I've had linebackers tell me that their coaches don't let them plyo step, right? Being able to break down that technique and show them how single leg strength applies to plyo steps and helps them fill that gap more quickly. I've had offensive linemen tell me that they don't cross over when we teach a crossover technique. Being able to show them how when we do a certain bungee resisted drill, that actually does look like when they do a run block. So it's helping them understand movement in a different light. All these athletes just see exercises. They're typically filtered into programs where they're treated like a number. They see their workouts and they have to go. Your job is to pull the veil back. Your job is to help them understand this is why coach programs this, or we're doing lateral lunges that day. Cool, I get that. I cut. I have to move laterally. I understand this. It's no different, again, than what major organizations do with their employees when they help them understand the big picture, or when Google gave people 20% time. It's this kind of level of autonomy and mastery and purpose, so they feel like they understand that on a different level. I got to get to some other questions, so hopefully that helps to relate or research, relate, and reframe. Let's see. I would like you to give some more thoughts on breaking through with guys that you don't agree with in coaching philosophies. Okay, great. So this one, Rowan, sorry if I mispronounced that. I never try to down talk another coach. It's a small world. I've had coaches, bad talk me, coaches bad talk each other. It's funny, Ron McKeefrey talks about it all the time. We're really the only profession where everybody just seems to want to flex against each other, and this guy's wrong and this guy's right. And you never see what this guy does, and why doesn't this guy do that? One of the college jobs I had, I had a colleague that would come in and pull up things on Strength Performance Network and just sit there and spend a half hour talking about how this guy's got shit technique and that university's crap. And guys, when you see something online, or when you see something, or you see an athlete come here and they tell you they've never done X, Y, and Z, take that with a grain of salt. When I was at Exos, we had a tremendous amount of marketing towards the last piece of that. And we would squat and trap bar deadlift and, conventional deadlift and depth jump. But then what these people would capture that came in from the outside, whether it was Fox News or ESPN, they'd capture like the 2% of ropes that we did, or a kettlebell movement, or some kind of warm-up movement. And then they put that out and everybody thinks, oh, this is that. And it's like, I've seen coaches that they have guys doing hang clean, and one guy maybe doesn't have the technique of Pyrrhus Demas, right? And all of a sudden 30 strength coaches jump on him. Keep in mind that what you're seeing is a keyhole frame, right? Go talk to a coach, call them rather than being a thumb thug, or just go observe more than one session if you really want to get to know what they do. And like, really, we all have better things to do than to sit there and lambaste other people in the field. That's not going to feed your family. It doesn't make you look better like any great expert. You just look like an asshole, kind of, and you're not doing anything to better the field. So, you know, when an athlete comes in and they say, man, I have an offensive lineman from the Atlanta Falcons right now, and I was getting ready to have him squat, right? We were doing squats, and they had a choice between front or back squat, depending on their body, you know, kind of biomechanics and how they're put together and what they've done in the past. And I've never seen a more atrocious squat in my life. He performed a body weight squat fairly decent when we assessed him, but watching him squat under load was like watching Lindsay Lohan in the early 2000s, right? It was just a train wreck. Sorry if you don't get that pop culture reference. So I took him back to a goblet squat, and he goes, I haven't squatted in over 5 years. And so I sit there and hear him, you know, talk about how all he's done is leg press. I'm not going to sit there and say, your coach leg presses you, you know, what the heck? You know, all I just try to say is, hey, you know what? When you're with your coach, I'm sure he's got a reason for doing that. Here, I want you to do this movement, and I'm going to tell you why, right? Don't you try to build other people up and just try to handle yourself as a professional, because there needs to be a lot more professionalism in this field if any of us want to have any kind of true longevity and be taken seriously. Let me get to another question here. Let's see here. How do we provide support outside of the gym without letting people slip into learned helplessness, right? And guilt tripping. Okay, so I'm trying to see if I can bucket some of these. We got some great questions. I would like to hear you give more thoughts on breaking through. We talked about that. Sorry, one more here. Handful of female athletes, a relationship is a friendship, but at times athletes forget that I'm a first friend and second. Absolutely. So discussing kind of 2 and 1. There does have to be a clear divide between being a coach and friend. Building buy-in and having a trust-based relationship doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're this buddy-buddy. It means that they see you as a guide. And you have to be really upfront with them and say, listen, guys, I'm your coach, and it's my job to get you better, and I'm going to hold you accountable so you don't waste my time or yours. But at the same time, I want you to know that I am here for you, right? We're called strength coaches, and I think that's the most adequate term. And just listen why. Because you're not only building people's strength physically, but you're building it mentally and spiritually as well if you're really doing your job, right? Performance specialist doesn't really adequately talk about that. If you call you're a physical preparation coach, that doesn't do it justice. Strength is from the inside out, right? And so being able to teach them, and I've had athletes, especially when I coach female athletes in the college setting, that want to get a little close sometimes more than they should. Or I've had professional athletes that think just because of who they are, I'm going to cut them some slack. You've got to have a little bit of tough love there. You know, there's not necessarily any kind of strategy other than outright communication and being honest. When we talk about self-image and self-efficacy, to talk about Max, you know, self-image is getting these guys to understand that it's a process and failure is okay, right? And that goes into Zach Brulet's communication with me on Twitter of how do I help guys buy-in becomes so much difficult once everybody's failed. Really, it shouldn't, right? Talent needs trauma. I'll say that again. Talent needs trauma. And a big part of a presentation that I've given domestically and internationally talks about upwards of 10 case studies where a person or a culture has experienced a calamity and then rebounded either that year or in subsequent years to really do tremendous things. Right? An example would be the Joplin tornado. The St. Louis Cardinals won the World Series. A heat wave in Chicago, Illinois in the mid-90s that killed over 500 people in a matter of days. Chicago Bulls went on to win 3 NBA championships. After Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, the New Orleans Saints won the Super Bowl. After Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile barrier, we saw countless people do that. I worked with military and special forces that were told they would never run again. I've seen 4 to 6 of them run again and regain their life and autonomy, right? These things, when somebody is struggling and a team's 3-12 or 0-6, that's a time for you to step up and show them how they can be different. And you say, guys, you really got 2 choices here. You can sit here and rebel and bitch and moan and point the finger, or you can understand that really, you know, this is the time for you to strive. When you're under a load that's heavy, do you just stop and let the weight collapse? No, right? We get under the load and we give it our best. People really need to understand that, you know, it's during those times of strife where you have the opportunity to be great. And that is really when you get a great personality profile of your team. You see the people that want to come up and they're these crusaders, right? They want to grab a hold and go. And you see the people that really, guys, probably aren't built for long-term success in the competitive arena, because if having a bad performance or a bad season crushes them, imagine what life is going to do to them. And that's what I let one of my athletes know the other day. He didn't get a franchise tag that he wanted, right? And they had a terrible season. Then you sit there and you help them remind the scope, and you're like, guys, look at your behaviors, look at your goals. Do your behaviors match your goals? And there's a tremendous amount of research out there that talks about whether it's grit, like Angela Duckworth talks about, or whether it's resilience, or whether, guys, it just comes down to hardiness and these people being able to overcome strife and struggle. Businesses have done it as well. People come out of bankruptcy. You have to find some kind of mission, or like I said earlier, a way to operationalize people's purpose so that they can rebuild. I was at Nebraska after they had one of their worst years. And people didn't hide from the fact that they had a bad year. They talked about it like, we've got to build on this. And this is where it starts, with this piece of the culture. And you've got to embody that yourself. So many times we act like we have all the answers for our athletes, and really we don't have any kind of balanced life ourselves, or we don't lead from the front, right? So you've got to inculcate that in your culture and be able to move on. Continuing to look at this, thoughts utilizing the 3 R's for Gen Pop environment. Everybody is an athlete. It doesn't matter. I work with Gen Pop too. I've worked with youth. I've worked with a wide range. Guys, you get to know people in everyday life, right? Like, chances are all of you are going to sit there and shake somebody's hand in the future. That's the research piece, right? Hey, Bill, what do you do? I've been in strength and conditioning 14 years. You get to know them. And hopefully you have enough social intelligence there to understand that whatever Bill tells you he does, let's say it's construction, you try to find common ground there to build rapport, right? So authenticity, knowing your audience, building rapport, letting yourself, don't worry about being the expert, give up ground, and that's part of it. So it doesn't matter if it's an athlete or Gen Pop. I'm going to get to know them. I want to find a way to relate to them so they see me as a peer, or at least somebody that cares about their long-term goals. And then I'm going to find a way really to reframe and find a common purpose there. I went and watched the UFC fights at a buddy's house last night. There wasn't one person that was in strength and conditioning except for the host. It's not like I sit on my couch and don't talk to them then. So this engagement, this communication is not a unique subject to strength and conditioning. I didn't invent the wheel. What I'm trying to do is take things that have been common practice in management and corporations and social psychology and influence, Robert Cialdini's work, and I simply study the shit out of them and apply them into strength and conditioning. If you need that name again, Robert Cialdini, tremendous resource. Also, Robert Greene, tremendous resource. Adam Alter, tremendous resource. Study the work of Charles Darwin. I'm not talking evolution. I'm talking about how this guy studied the environments and how environments altered behavior. So all these pieces come into play whether they're an athlete or not. Let me catch my breath a minute. I'm trying to answer as many questions as possible. I want to give you guys research. Make sure that you're not always looking at, Journal of Strength and Conditioning. Look at social psychology. Look at behavioral psychology. Look at Harvard Business Reviews. There's a great book. I'm losing the name of it right now, but it's basically social psychology, impact on exercise and performance. There's tons of literature out there, guys, on this stuff. You just got to dig beyond your realm. One of the books I'm reading right now is The Wisdom of Psychopaths. And it talks about how sociopaths and psychopaths still have redeeming traits that allow them to connect with people in unique ways and thus somewhat fool the world. It's Green with an E for the person that just asked there, Alex. You have to learn from everybody. Look around you and one of my favorite quotes that I give in my presentation, I'm trying to remember it, is Sun Tzu in The Art of War says, all these people see the methods by which I conquer, but none see the strategy by which victory is evolved. That means when you come visit me at Unbreakable, or you come visit another coach anywhere else, don't sit there and just look at the exercises and the drills. Guys, watch the coach. When I worked side by side with Dan Paff at Altus and Exos, people would come and want to see all this stuff that he did with track and field, but very few people would sit there and listen to how Dan talked. Dan isn't doing, by and large, anything drill-wise with absolute speed that is otherworldly, all right? And he'll be the first to admit that. Some people are appalled at the relatively low volumes they use with training, right? But the guy can communicate and operationalize a purpose like no other, and he gets the big picture. Get the big picture. You have to be able to study interaction with the same level or even a higher level that you study physiology and adaptation-based training principles. You have to look out of all these multiple lenses, because the future belongs to people in this field that get their hands dirty and can mesh a variety of sciences, both the social sciences and the training related sciences. Otherwise, you're going to be left in the dust. Alex, Robert Cialdini, Robert Greene, Dale Carnegie, Adam Alter. Yeah, man, there's plenty. I'll tell you what, Daniel Pink's best book is not Drive. It's To Sell as Human. And To Sell as Human gives a great amount of insight as to how we can communicate certain aspects. Captivology by Ben Parr. I'm not going to give any more than that, because guys, again, like, read the books and then we can go from there, but it's what you practice. Here's a gold nugget. If you listen to only one thing I say here, here's a gold nugget. Please, please, please. One of the first things I always have my interns do, and I don't care how stupid this sounds, I've had over 50 people tell me that this was a huge part of their coaching development. I have all my interns, they have to do an assignment where they start a conversation with 10 different strangers, anywhere, bookstore, on the street, and the goal is to simply get a conversation with them for more than 5 minutes on any topic whatsoever, right? And they have to write a review, just a simple kind of paragraph on what they learned, what the conversation was about, the body language they witnessed, what they paid attention to, whether they, if I'm sitting here and I'm talking to a stranger who's got his hand on his chin, facilitating an aspect of mimicry, eye contact, using humor, using their name, right? Dale Carnegie talks about there's no sweeter sound to any individual than their name. Don't refer to your athletes or clients as guys, girls, Steven, Robert, nice job with the clean there. We want to make sure you keep the bar close to your body. Push the ground away when you move, Robert. Things like that. Just, it's so stupid, simple, but people don't do it, right? People don't do it. They don't tell them, first of all, why are we doing this movement or exercise? What's the whole purpose? How do I do it? How do I not do it? Let's get to work, right? Start with why. People, all of you, no matter how educated you are, myself included in this, everybody, are really emotional, selfish creatures. We want to remember, we want to know how any of this affects us. We want to know how it affects us. But the problem is every coach is so worried about showing how they're the expert, about how their program is the best, about how this is going to help with X, Y, and Z, how smart we are. We lose these guys. We lose them, right? They talk about, and this has nothing to do with politics, okay? So don't take this as a political statement. One writer of a book, I'm reading the book, rereading it, Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi, right? And he talks about he spent a day with Hillary Clinton and she must have shaken 2,000 hands, a loose estimate, okay? And he said the number one thing was so incredible is how she remembered everybody's name. Do you know how great that makes people feel? And somebody rolling their eyes right now thinking that we need to be talking about catapult or monitoring or what kind of tools or tech you have when you can't even engage people on a base level and tell them why they're doing a particular exercise. A good buddy of mine is the strength coach of the Miami Dolphins, and I have several more at different pro sports clubs around the world. And guys, when their team's losing, you can collect all the RPE and omega wave data and all that you want, but the athletes still want to know, what it does for them. One of the biggest complaints is, we have omega wave, we have this and that, but we have guys that literally would rather pay the team fine than come before the team meeting and do their omega wave, right? Or, hey, RPE, we try to get their RPE after a practice or a game, and half the smart asses just give me the number 4 because they don't want to deal with it. People often think pro sports is the upper echelon, right? Or the number 1 universities. Guys, you got to keep in mind, again, people are the ultimate variable. Just because they're pro athletes or world-class organizations doesn't mean they're filled with guys that like to train, right? I'm sure some of you can all relate. Like, you've been to places, and my buddies in the NFL can talk about this too, where, you know, you tell guys what to work up to and they either half-ass the form, half-ass the technique. You can't control it all. The best you can try to be is a maestro and a guide and a conductor. You know, some of those are interchangeable. And but listen, the greatest stuff happens, you know, in very tight spaces and personal spaces, meaning that it's the micro that makes the macro tick. It's not all these toys. They have their place and they're tremendously valuable. So nobody needs to go on a rant and say, listen to Brett's webinar. He hates science. He hates training. It's all about feel-good communication. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you've got to have a balance, and you can't just imagine that because you have this elysium of workout facilities or these high-end clientele. Guys, my programming for my NFL guys is pretty boring. It's pretty boring until, like, there's probably 2 to 3 weeks out of the year where we do some exciting stuff. And by exciting, I mean cluster training. Every now and then we do super maximal eccentrics with a guy that I've worked with for a few years, or we do advanced plyometric training. Like, I'm not doing any crazy stuff. Nobody else, no matter what they say, is doing crazy stuff. And if they are, they're usually hiding behind some kind of insecurity where they feel like they need to super compensate or overcompensate, for a lack of true skill. The foundations and the basics will lead you to where you want to go. And yeah, you know, your communication style will help you navigate that so much more quickly. Training is not a system, it's a roadmap. There's many roads. We all just have to abide by that legend, which is sound scientific principles and training related principles, great communication and trust, and then we can adapt anything and take any route that we go. Luke, off topic, but you seem like a very busy man. How do you prioritize your time management around business training? Luke, I fail every day at this. I didn't have a lot of mentors growing up. I had a lot of people that, oddly enough, wanted to see me not succeed because I think it bugged people that I have a personality and I wasn't just this kind of like hard-ass staunch coach, or I just think I was probably around some insecure individuals. I've certainly learned from a great amount of people too, so I'm not sitting here saying I've done it myself, aren't I great? But to your point about being busy, it means a lot to me since I haven't had a mentor to be what I didn't have for other people. So my wife just about kills me every night because I get all these Facebook messages and I can't respond to them all. I just can't, between email and Twitter, but I kill myself trying to, and I'm leaving voice messages and then I'm answering tweets and I'm trying to do email. At some point, you know, it gets the best of you and you just got to say, I've got a day where I'm not doing this, right? Or you just got to be honest with people and say, hey, let's hop on the phone. I am much more of a phone call or Skype or Google Hangout guy where I can see you and talk to you and get far more information exchange in 10 minutes than write 30 emails back and forth, right? And so time management wise, I continue to try to find an essentialism-based approach. But now being part business owner at Unbreakable, I'll come with my list every day and I'll have about 40 more things at the end. My wife got in a terrible car accident 2 days ago. Our movers lost half of our stuff on the way out to Phoenix. This last month of my life has been a nightmare, but you know what? I care enough, so I just try my best to get back to everybody with a sound prioritization. Here's a hard tool if somebody wants something very specific. I use Microsoft OneNote. I'm sorry, it's better than Evernote. I use Moleskine notebooks. I try to keep this stuff. I have a pretty decent memory, but there are things that I forget. But time management is kind of a myth, especially if you're a business owner, especially if you're a full-time coach. To give more context, I'm part owner out here. I'm the director of performance. I'm the lead strength and conditioning coach, and I'm now general manager. So literally from ordering some equipment to running groups to answering emails to helping get our staff running around, I think I'm aging. But man, like it's what we do this for, right? Like, to be a great coach, you have to be a great communicator and manager. So I would really, really, really strongly recommend that all of you get out there and take opportunities that are a little bit scary, that take opportunities that put you in a realm where you may work with different populations. Guys, I'm well known for training athletes. I've started training actors here as well. And no, I'm not going to be Brett Bartholomew Hollywood specialist, but I've got actors that have never lifted weights before, free weights, now doing goblet squats, trap bar deadlifts, step jumps, right? That's awesome. And you know how much that teaches you about coaching? It teaches them about, sound training. Think bigger in terms of the difference you want to make here. Think bigger. It's not just about all this, elite athlete stuff. Everybody is an athlete. So think bigger, expand your repertoire, and get going. Communication, let's see. I'm trying to find some more things, guys. And how do I restore my energy? I moved into a place with a pool. Carl Volley said it really well. He goes, what did he say? An hour in the pool is like a day of recovery. Man, he was spot on that. And I don't know where he got it from, because Carl is sure as heck not smart enough to come up with that on his own. I'm winking when I say that. I hope he's on here. I try to also, music is a big one. So let me go off on a tangent here a little bit. When you start thinking about influence, seduction, manipulation, communication, all of these things that kind of tie in together, don't get caught up in the word choice, right? It's the actions that determine if it's a negative connotation or positive. One thing is you look into the science of music, cadence, rhythms, all that. You can find how much you can drastically impact the central nervous system, right? Or our sympathetic and parasympathetic state. When I leave work now, I try to turn it on to something chill, like kind of a lounge, steady beat, reggae, anything like that. Because all day I'm in this crazy environment. And we're in West Hollywood. The music's going all day. I'm intense with my own training, and I'll just get an adrenal dump again and again and again. And it's hit me the older I've gotten. So I try to influence the music. I try to get into the pool twice a week. I go for walks. Yeah, that's right. Like I deadlift, but I also still go for walks, right? You have to manage yourself too. Otherwise your brain is just fried and you're going to get burnout. So all those pieces. I know we're running out of time here, so I want to try to get as many as I can. Essentialism, waiting for a couple more questions, guys. I really want to give you specifics. So if there's something I didn't cover, let me know. I'm trying my best. Otherwise, look out for the book. Hopefully at the end of this year, if I get some more time, it's going to be replete with strategies, with resources, with science, some of which, I couldn't go into too deep here. Otherwise you'd have no reason to read the book, but I really want to give you a guide to help you. Not only, we have plenty of guides on the programming standpoint. I want to give you guides on how to interact with people so that we can make the most of this via engagement. So please be on the lookout. It won't be a perfect book. It won't have all the answers, but it's certainly written with you in mind and it's honest thoughts. So anything else? James, what time do we need to wrap up here? I want to make sure I give everybody every ounce of my time I can.
Brett, it's we've been on just about an hour, so whatever suits you. If you want to take a couple more questions, shoot for it. It's down to you and your time, mate.
Okay, so let's talk about a little bit more of the science. When we talk about building buy-in, not only does it come down to knowing your audience and knowing yourself, but we've got to get their attention, right? And we see coaches out there that get attention by being crazy. We see coaches that try to have demonstrations of strength. Guys, getting attention just means getting them to care, right? And getting them to care comes through honest communication and them knowing that you give a shit about their goals. A great book about attention, I mentioned it earlier, was Captivology. And really, if you build it, they don't come. That doesn't work in today's modern world. People have all these options of places to go train or people to train with, right? So you've got to build it, but also have the environment be one that's dynamic, and you've got to be able to educate them and engage them. And Gary Schofield says it great. If I can't engage an athlete appropriately, right, for me, I use the 3 R's, or I try to find ways to relate, or I try to ask really probing questions that are respectful but give me more than just a yes/no answer. If I can't engage somebody, I can't educate them. If I can't educate them, I can't empower them, right? And so you look at these things, and again, you think about, like I said, human nature. One of our deepest human needs is to be understood. It really is. We try to understand the universe we're a part of. We try to understand all these pieces. Athletes look for a coach that guides them, not just one that commands them. And I'd really suggest, one thing that I've done before is I've set up my phone camera on a tripod, and I've taped myself coaching groups, right? I've taped myself coaching groups and individuals, and I've gone back later and I've looked at what's my body language like? How often did I spend talking to each athlete? Did I align myself with what I call the sprinkler system format of coaching, meaning I never have my back to them. I always align myself in the gym where I can see them and I can manage everything going together as one. Did I at least make two guys laugh, or did I make everybody laugh or smile once? Because that does matter. All these little things. And what I do is I'd sit back and I just analyze myself and my coaching strategy, right? And I just felt like I couldn't sit there and tell these interns, what they needed to do better if I don't do that myself. And none of us will ever make it. You'll never be a finished product. Videotape yourself, have your staff pick each other apart, do coach collaborations where somebody comes and coaches with you and they watch you and they give you feedback. Don't be temperamental about it. Just understand that all feedback helps. When people show resistance, Max, I love it, right? Like, it's easy to talk to an athlete that is open-minded and, yeah, I'm here to learn and I want to grow and I want to be the best. When people have resistance to something, that's a virus, right? I had resistance to treatment when I was in the hospital because these people, I had a nurse that literally said, you'll spend the rest of your life in here. And when I left, she told me I'd be back. People will have resistance because of a number of things. Worked with an NFL athlete that said he hated the weight room. He hated the weight room because his college coach just beat the bejesus out of him. So all of a sudden, knowing that they did all kinds of powerlifting and weightlifting techniques and just like literally no load was ever enough load, and I don't think they paid attention to this guy's form, I had to use just simple light dumbbells, kettlebells, and body weight to get him back into understanding that strength training is not just this typecasted singular thing, right? Strength is a process. I've had another guy that says, like, listen, I make more money than you. Why should I listen to you? Gotta be a little quick-witted sometimes. I reminded him that he only makes more money than me if he actually stays in professional sports, right? And so letting these guys know that, listen, because you make more money than somebody doesn't mean you don't have to listen. You have to kind of drive a hard wall with these guys sometimes. So when you meet resistance, you've got to dig deep. That's like saying, hey, you know what? I've already used every exercise I know. What do I do next? Well, you find different derivations of that exercise. You might use a one-arm dumbbell bench press. You might use reverse lunge from a deficit. You might use band squats, chain squats. So you do that with your communication as well. You find different things. Okay, I tried relating to him. I've tried asking him questions. I've tried just leaving him alone. You know what? Let me just kind of see, kind of learn a little bit more about his past or what drives him. Let me research him online. Let me find things like that. Like, just dig, try to find these things. And trust me, guys, I've worked with 319 professional athletes and a wide range of youth. And you're going to find some turds. You're going to tell some people that they're probably just not a good fit. That's okay. But give it your best try. Give it your best try and quit thinking that, like, don't get egotistical about it and think that everybody's just going to fall in line with you because you have a master's degree or a doctorate or because you've trained famous people. They don't give a shit. What they do care about is simple, basic human needs that you need to address. If somebody says, I know, and correcting them, looking at another thing there, let's see, I know, and correcting them when explaining the angle. Okay, so for example, I had an actor the other day that wanted to do pull-ups. Problem is this actor couldn't do pull-ups, right? No, I can do them, just let me kip. You're not kipping, bud. That's not this kind of gym, right? Oh, let me use a band. Well, we'll use a band in time, but what we're going to do today is eccentrics. Man, I don't want to do eccentrics. Well, you're going to try it today, right? I understand you pay good money to be here and I want to listen to you, but you're also, give this a try. If you don't like them, we won't do them again, right? Had him do about 3 to 4 sets of 5 by 5 second eccentrics. Guy came in the next day and felt his lats all the way down to his ankles. Obviously, I'm using, I'm joking with that, but he was sore beyond belief. Immediately, I made that guy feel something he's never felt before. I've never sat there and had to describe why he should do eccentric pull-ups again. People will always remember how you make them feel, right? They'll always remember how you make them feel. Find little ways to, kind of infiltrate that and get creative. With somebody that says, hey, how do you deal with actors with their, some of their temperaments? You'd be surprised at how many actors like somebody that just tells them to shut up and work. I'm a Midwest boy. I'm from Nebraska. I just let them know, guys, That's great that you've had success in your career. I'm not really enamored with that. Let's get going and let me know what drives you and pushes you, and I'm going to find that. But I also want you to be open-minded as well. If you're not, no hard feelings. We're not a good fit together. Set yourself up for success. Trying to keep thinking, guys. I want to answer as many questions as I can. Which motivational theories do I consider and why? I consider all of them. Do I use them all? It depends. Right? There's trans-theoretical models. Right? There's everything. There's you look at all these people that have studied behavioral therapy and social psychology. It's not which ones do you believe in. It's what pieces can you draw from that moment at time. I can't emphasize this enough that if my methods or anything like that was this candy bowl, guys, I might use them all, right? It just depends on what my principles. So I'll use ones that allow me to get to know the individual better, that if you read Robert Cialdini's work, he talks about social proof, reciprocity. Robert Greene and the 48 Laws of Power talks about certain trends of human nature. I try to just find, listen, we're all reliving the same history again and again and again. People seek attention. They want acknowledgement. People want validation, right? But they also want to learn. And another good book is Driven by Lawrence. Driven, Paul Lawrence, and Nitin Noria. These guys talk about, evolutionary psychology and the 4 drives, which is something I present on a lot. Again, I presented on Australia, Toronto, Ireland, and even Dubuque. But again, I mentioned it earlier. He says people either want to acquire, learn, bond, or defend, and we all are, amalgamation of those things. But really, a learn is somebody that wants to learn more about anything, right? Like, and we know that we're always trying to learn more, educate ourselves again in our profession, in our life, what have you, finances. Bond, we want to be around others like us. Tribal behavior. Nobody needs to know about research about, well, tell me about, the proof that people want to bond. Guys, human history, community, civilizations, tribes, all that. Like, we want to be around others like us. Acquire, same thing. We're always trying to provide better lives for our family or loved ones. Cavemen wanted to provide, food and wood for fire, and defend. We're all trying to defend, right? We all want to protect what we have. You have a security system in your house. Do you know self-defense? Would you fight if somebody tried to come after your family? These are part of my performance profiling system that you'll learn about if you ever hear me speak, or if, I mention it a little bit in the book, but I have a whole performance-based people profile where I categorize these people, and that affects the drills that I choose, the competitions I utilize, exercise selection, how I pair guys up. It's no different than we track 1RMs and vertical jump profile and broad jump. Why aren't you tracking people based on personality types? Why aren't you tracking people based on how they learn? You don't think that's important? Talk to companies like ConAgra and Google and the United States military, who routinely use things like, whether it's Hogan personalities or strength finders or, insights or the DISC assessment. Don't tell me that just because you haven't read about it in strength and conditioning, or, because Gregory Hoff hasn't written on it. And again, not a knock on Hoff. I'm just alluding to the fact that everybody just, strength and conditioning information. This stuff is out there. Explore other realms. Companies spend millions of dollars trying to learn about their employees. You have got to do the same thing yourself. I go in depth on all these different personality profiling options that are out there in my book. And so that'll be something that you'll be able to learn more about in the future. But that's a big piece there, and that's a nugget. I'm going to wrap up here I'm going to try to answer a couple more questions. I know my voice isn't particularly charming to listen to. Talk about communication with athletes and other coaches. If somebody's hooked on their philosophy, how would you suggest them being open to other principles? Brother, this depends. You have to be cautious, right? That's just like when you come into a corporate scenario and you want to change things from the inside out, but you got a lot of egos and power dynamics. The first thing you have to do is just shut up and learn. If you come in, I used to think that if I took over a team again and got back into the team setting, I'd kick down the doors and say, this is how we're doing it. We're changing the culture and get ready for a re-energizing kind of experience. And now we're doing Olympic lifts. I understand you guys have been doing machine-based training. And then I realized that, man, do you come off like a grade A asshole and an ineffective leader if you don't do that. James Dobson in Nebraska once told me that they were lifting the guys 3 days a week. And I was like, why not 4? Why not 5? I was just starting in the field, relatively speaking. And he goes, you know what? We came in and we assessed the guys, and we found that they were pretty damn strong, but they didn't move well and they weren't quick. So 3 days a week, we feel like we could keep them strong, keep an appropriate stimulus there, but still give us more time to work on speed and movement development. Guys, now somebody would be like, oh yeah, you assessed them, huh? How did you assess them? What metrics did you use? Do you use Tendo? Use GymAware? Use Push? Well, did you know the one that you use is bullshit? Like, nothing's perfect, guys. You got to use what you got, right? And as long as it's consistent and you create a system there, it's going to get better and better. Now, who has this unlimited budget where now we can effectively be bourgeois about the testing modalities? You know what, force plate and all this sweet tech I have here at Unbreakable? I got a cryotherapy. We have a cryotherapy device. We have showers. We have all kinds of barbells, dumbbells, heavy bags, great nutrition stuff, things like that. I don't have a Nord board. I don't have a force plate. And it's certainly not because I don't believe in them, but my budget doesn't allow for that. But I promise you, we're going to get some good training done. And if the day comes where I can buy those tools, we'll do the best we can. But we've got to stop this. Any of you guys out there that are these, again, you can't be a junkie in terms of communication and height. You can't be a junkie in terms of strength, and you can't be a junkie in terms of sports science and all this. You've got to be balanced. But anyway, you've got to sit there and listen. You've got to say, what about this culture is great already? Now, what do I need to change? All right, we have a dogmatic approach there. The power hierarchy seems to be with these 3 individuals. I need to seek to understand before I try to infiltrate and do anything that I want to do. Otherwise, guys, you're going to be booted right out the door. In the 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene talks about this. He'll talk about in feudal system Japan or in any other, he'll talk about in Soviet history. He'll talk about any of these places. And you all have your own story. I'm talking to people from around the world. So you all know your cautionary tales of individuals that tried to overthrow the emperor or tried to insidiously affect a culture. And what ends up happening half the time? If they do gain power, they hold on to it for a very short time period, or they get caught and off with their head. So you need to understand it's not about you. Affect what change you can. Be patient. That's hard for people. Be patient and go from there. Right? You've got to have effective use of what you have now, like Darius just said, but you've also got to have appropriate use of your willpower and your resources in terms of how you approach these individuals rather than trying to affect wholesale change too quickly. So I hope this helps people. I know we had to cover a tremendous amount. This is the first time I've ever just had to rant. I'd much rather just answer your guys' questions or kind of let somebody lead the discussion, or typically, like I said, I present. Max, I'll come to Germany to present when you invite me, brother. But I wanted to give you guys as much information as I can. I'm not trying to hide with any of this. I'd much rather talk to you this than on Twitter or Instagram. There's not enough characters. But the big thing is this matters. It matters, and if you don't think it does, I promise you'll be left in the dust no matter what kind of budget or knowledge you have. We all have gaps, right? Conversely, if you're a great communicator and you need to enhance your programming specific knowledge, get your ass going on that. And the best way to do it is get in the thick of the field and find a mentor, or find, reading isn't always going to do it. Read books for sure, but nobody cares if you read a book a week if you didn't learn anything from it. You can quote me on that. You've got to stay focused on this stuff, and you've got to practice what you preach. Otherwise, none of this stuff matters. Okay? So James, unless there's anything else, brother, I'm going to wrap up there. I hope I gave everybody as much as I could.
Brett, that's superb. I think, the amount of interaction that we've seen there on the Q&A just shows how much I think the messages that you were getting across just resonate with people. And we're in a business where we're dealing with people, and I think sometimes people can forget that, and the fact that we've got someone like yourself who's bringing that to the fore and making people really think outside of the box of the weight room and the track and the sports hall or whatever it is that you work in. I think it's a huge thing. And I think,
guys, if any of you are having a hard time believing me on this, just go find a world-class coach and ask them if communication matters in what they do. Ask them. ask any CEO, ask any business owner, ask anybody if communication matters. There's a reason social media is so preeminent now in our cultures worldwide. People are starving for relationships and authentic communication. Look up engagement, look up employee engagement, right? Look up anything you can on Harvard Business Review, social psychology. There's plenty of stuff out there. And this it's not really a soft science, right? There's more data and metrics on this than there is in our field. Read Good to Great, read Built to Last, and quit always trying to find differences. Find commonalities and common threads, but listen, like information alone doesn't change behavior. I'll say that again. Information alone does not change behavior. There's got to be something else that drives it. So you just being smart in one domain is not going to do it for you. It's not. So quit specializing and realize that we've got to have a balance here. And the ultimate performance variable is always people. Ultimate performance variable is always people. And that's why programs can't always be replicated. That's why, you've got to let principles guide you. But we all know the stresses that we encounter daily and our athletes encounter daily. If you think you have the perfect plan, I'm sorry. You have a lot of rude awakenings coming, and I've been there myself too. That's what made me start going down this route. I failed more times than I can count. So
for sure. I think we could probably run a webinar like this next week and probably have people queuing up to get back. But maybe we need to talk about a part 2 to tackle a little bit more.
Would love that.
Or even as we've discussed previously, maybe try and get you over here to the UK and get people some real contact time.
I'm better looking in real life, but Dave Tenney gives me shit because apparently I'm shorter than he thought. I'm a whopping 5'8". Introduced myself to Dave Tenney one time. He goes, "Oh, you're shorter than I thought." I go, "Dave, that is spoken like a true sports science expert there, buddy." Yeah, I always try to give him a hard time whenever I get on any of these things, but I'd love to help any way I can, guys. If you reach out, I'm never big time in you or not trying to get back to you. Sometimes it just takes me time. I really am a guy that coaches all the damn time and tries to run a business. So please don't take it personally, but I love the support. I'll always try to get back to you the best I can. But please, one thing I will say is do some of the work yourself. So often I get people that just want to take and want all this information. Remember, whenever you're learning from somebody, it's reciprocity. So I can't tell you all the answers. I can't give you everything, but I'll try to guide you the best I can. But I appreciate all the support and all the love. I want to do right by this industry. I want to carry the torch for people that did this well before us. So thanks again for all the support. And James, thanks so much for the opportunity.
No worries, no worries. We're getting calls in the chat box now. Get him to the UK. Get him to the UK. So
I would love to. Yeah, I'll share
and see what we can sort out.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, everybody. I hope you guys took some takeaways from it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thank you for everyone taking the time out on their Sunday evening to jump on the webinar and join us. Brett, huge thanks again. And obviously, let's keep the conversation going and see what else we can do. We'll speak to you soon.
Anytime. Take care.